"Stop! Cancel the $3 billion deal immediately." The words echoed through the pristine marble lobby of Meridian Financial Tower as security guards rushed toward the source of the disruption. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. There, standing near the executive elevator in his faded blue janitor's uniform, was Marcus Rodriguez, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in his calloused hands. Around him, the city's most powerful executives froze in shock, their expensive suits and polished shoes creating a stark contrast against Marcus's worn work clothes and scuffed sneakers. The elevator doors had just opened, revealing CEO Jonathan Sterling and his entourage of board members, all dressed for what was supposed to be the most important business meeting in the company's history. In less than an hour, they were scheduled to sign a deal that would merge Meridian Financial with European investment giant Wilhelm Holdings, creating the largest financial institution on the East Coast. The $3 billion transaction had been 2 years in the making. But now, this janitor was telling them to stop everything. The morning had started like any other for Marcus Rodriguez, as he walked through the empty streets of downtown Chicago at 4:30 a.m., his breath visible in the crisp October air. The towering glass and steel buildings of the financial district loomed above him, their windows dark, except for the scattered few where other early workers were already beginning their day. Marcus had been making this same walk for the past 8 years, ever since he'd taken the night janitorial position at Meridian Financial. His apartment in Pilsen was a modest 2-bedroom space that he shared with his 12-year-old daughter, Sophia. She was still sleeping when he'd quietly slipped out, her homework spread across their small kitchen table where she'd fallen asleep the night before while working on a math project. Marcus had carefully moved her papers aside and covered her with a blanket before leaving for work. As a single father, these early morning hours were precious to him, the only time when the world was quiet enough for him to think about anything other than survival. The Meridian Financial Tower stood 42 stories tall, its facade gleaming even in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus used his security card to enter through the service entrance, nodding to the overnight security guard who barely looked up from his newspaper. This building housed some of the most influential financial minds in the country, people who made decisions that affected millions of lives and moved billions of dollars with a single phone call. Yet none of them knew that the man who emptied their trash cans and mopped their floors had once been one of them. Marcus began his routine on the 38th floor, methodically moving through the executive offices with his cart of cleaning supplies. He worked efficiently and quietly, his movements practiced from years of repetition. The offices were luxurious, with mahogany desks, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. Framed diplomas from prestigious universities lined the walls, alongside photos of executives shaking hands with senators, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. But Marcus wasn't just cleaning these offices. As he worked, his eyes automatically scanned the documents left on desks, the financial reports displayed on computer screens, the whiteboards covered in complex calculations and projections. Old habits died hard, and despite himself, he found his mind analyzing market trends, risk assessments, and investment strategies that others had carelessly left visible. Most of what he saw was routine business, the everyday operations of a major financial institution. However, this particular morning was different. As Marcus emptied the wastebasket in the office of Senior Vice President Catherine Brooks, something caught his attention. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Marcus carefully extracted the crumpled document from the wastebasket, his hands trembling slightly as he recognized the letterhead. Wilhelm Holdings, European Investment Analysis. The words swam before his eyes as memories he had spent 8 years suppressing came flooding back. This was not just any financial report. This was a detailed risk assessment of the upcoming merger, and the numbers told a story that made his blood run cold. The document outlined severe financial irregularities within Wilhelm Holdings that had been cleverly hidden through a complex web of offshore accounts and shell companies. Marcus recognized the techniques immediately because he had spent the better part of his previous career investigating exactly these types of financial manipulations. The European firm was essentially bankrupt, propped up by fraudulent transactions and phantom assets that existed only on paper. If Meridian Financial proceeded with this merger, They would not be acquiring a valuable partner. They would be absorbing toxic debt that could destroy the company within months. But Marcus Rodriguez, the janitor, had no business understanding complex international finance. He was supposed to empty trash cans and mop floors, not analyze multinational corporate structures. So he stood there in the dim office lighting, holding evidence of what could become one of the largest financial disasters in recent history, knowing that nobody would listen to a man in a custodial uniform. The irony was almost unbearable. 15 years ago, Marcus had been Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, one of the most respected financial analysts on Wall Street. He had held a PhD in international economics from Harvard and an MBA from Wharton. Major corporations had paid him millions to conduct exactly this type of due diligence investigation. His reports had saved companies from disastrous acquisitions and helped others identify profitable opportunities that their own internal teams had missed. Financial magazines had featured him on their covers, calling him the golden eye of Wall Street for his uncanny ability to spot hidden risks in seemingly perfect deals. His corner office at Goldman Sachs had been legendary, with its panoramic view of Manhattan and walls lined with awards from grateful clients. He had testified before Congress about financial regulations and had been invited to speak at economic forums around the world. Presidents had sought his advice on fiscal policy. His name had been mentioned in the same breath as the greatest financial minds of his generation. That life had ended on a rainy Thursday evening in October, 8 years ago. Marcus had been working late, as usual, preparing for a presentation to the Federal Reserve about emerging market risks. His wife, Elena, had called to remind him about their daughter Sophia's school play that evening. She was playing the lead role in the fourth-grade production of Cinderella, and she had been practicing her lines for weeks. Marcus had promised to be there, but the presentation was crucial, and he had convinced himself that there would be other plays, other opportunities to see his daughter perform. Elena had taken Sophia to the theater alone that night. They were driving home after the performance, Sophia still in her princess costume, chattering excitedly about how well the play had gone and asking when Daddy would be able to see her perform again. The drunk driver had run the red light at 60 miles per hour, striking their car on Elena's side. She had died instantly. Sophia had survived with broken ribs and a concussion, but the real damage had been to her spirit. When Marcus had arrived at the hospital, still wearing his expensive suit and carrying his presentation materials, Sophia had looked at him with eyes that seemed decades older than her 4 years. She had not asked where Mommy was. Somehow, she already knew. She had simply whispered that the other kids' daddies had been at the play, and then she had turned away from him and stared at the hospital wall. The guilt had consumed Marcus like acid. Every financial success, every prestigious client, every moment of professional recognition had been built on stolen time that should have belonged to his family. He had missed countless dinners, school events, bedtime stories, and quiet conversations while chasing deals and climbing the corporate ladder. The money had been intoxicating, the power addictive, but the cost had been everything that truly mattered. After Elena's funeral, Marcus had tried to return to his old life, but the numbers on spreadsheets reminded him of the hours he had lost. Board meetings felt like prisons keeping him away from Sophia, who was struggling with nightmares and panic attacks. Every business trip was another abandonment, every late night at the office another betrayal of the promise he had made at Elena's graveside to be the father Sophia needed. 6 months after the accident, Marcus had walked away from everything. He had resigned from Goldman Sachs, sold his Manhattan penthouse, and used the money to pay for Sophia's therapy and medical expenses. They had moved to Chicago to start fresh, choosing the city specifically because nobody in the financial district would recognize the former Wall Street legend. He had deliberately sought out menial work, jobs that would never follow him home or steal time from his daughter. The janitorial position at Meridian Financial had been perfect in its simplicity. He worked the night shift while Sophia slept, and was always home when she woke up for school. He picked her up every afternoon, helped with homework, and never missed another school event. They lived modestly but happily in their small apartment, where Sophia had slowly begun to smile again and trust that Daddy would be there when she needed him. Sophia was now 12 years old, bright and curious, with her mother's gentle spirit and her father's analytical mind. She excelled in mathematics and science, often asking Marcus complex questions about how things worked. He answered carefully, sharing knowledge without revealing the depth of his expertise. To her, he was simply Dad, the night janitor who knew a lot about numbers and always had time to help with homework. Their evening routine was sacred. Marcus would prepare dinner while Sophia finished her studies, and then they would sit together at their small kitchen table, sharing stories about their days. Sophia would tell him about her friends, her teachers, and her dreams of becoming an engineer, or maybe a scientist. Marcus would listen with complete attention, asking questions and offering encouragement, never letting his phone or work concerns interrupt these precious moments. He had built a new identity as Marcus the custodian, a quiet man who kept to himself and did his job well. His supervisors appreciated his reliability and attention to detail, though they sometimes wondered about the precision with which he organized supply closets and calculated cleaning supply inventories. His coworkers liked him because he was helpful and never complained about difficult assignments, though they occasionally noticed him reading financial newspapers during breaks and wondered why a janitor cared about stock market reports. Marcus had convinced himself that this simple life was enough, that he had found peace in anonymity and redemption in being present for his daughter. He told himself that the financial world could function perfectly well without him, that his analytical skills were no longer needed or wanted. But as he stood in that executive office, holding evidence of a catastrophic fraud that would destroy thousands of jobs and devastate countless families, he felt the old instincts awakening. The numbers did not lie. Wilhelm Holdings was a house of cards built on deception and desperation. The merger documents he had seen outlined a deal structure that would transfer Wilhelm's hidden debts to Meridian Financial, while making it nearly impossible to unwind the transaction once it was completed. It was a sophisticated scheme that would take months to fully expose, by which time the damage would be irreversible. Marcus carefully folded the document and slipped it into his uniform pocket. He had 6 hours until the signing ceremony, 6 hours to decide whether to remain Marcus the janitor or become Dr. Rodriguez one final time. He thought about Sophia, sleeping peacefully in their apartment, trusting that her father would be there when she woke up. He thought about Elena, who had died while he was chasing professional glory. And he thought about the thousands of Meridian Financial employees who had no idea their jobs were about to disappear because of a deal that should never happen. The choice was agonizing, but as Marcus resumed his cleaning duties, he began to formulate a plan. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble lobby of Meridian Financial Tower as Marcus completed his final cleaning rounds. The building was beginning to come alive with the early arrivals. Ambitious junior executives clutching coffee cups and briefcases, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Marcus moved among them like a ghost, invisible in his janitorial uniform, his presence so routine that most employees looked right through him without acknowledgement. At 7:30, the executive floors buzzed with unprecedented activity. Marcus could hear the excitement in voices carrying down the hallways as he emptied wastebaskets and restocked supply closets. Today was the day. The Wilhelm Holdings merger would be finalized in just 3 hours, transforming Meridian Financial into a global powerhouse. Champagne bottles were being chilled in executive refrigerators. Photographers had already arrived to document the historic signing ceremony. The mayor's office had sent representatives to witness what they called the most significant business deal in Chicago's recent history. Marcus paused outside the conference room where final preparations were underway. Through the glass walls, he could see CEO Jonathan Sterling reviewing documents with his legal team. Sterling was a man in his early 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, known throughout the financial industry for his aggressive expansion strategies and unwavering confidence. He had built Meridian Financial from a regional bank into a national institution through a series of carefully orchestrated acquisitions, each one adding to his reputation as a visionary leader. Beside Sterling sat his daughter, Rebecca Sterling Morrison, the company's chief operating officer. She was brilliant and ruthless, having earned her position through merit rather than nepotism, though whispers in the industry suggested her father's influence had certainly helped. Rebecca had been the driving force behind the Wilhelm Holdings deal, spending 18 months negotiating terms and convincing the board that this merger would secure Meridian's future for generations. The irony was not lost on Marcus. Here was another father-daughter team, working together in the highest echelons of corporate power, while he scrubbed floors and hid his true identity to protect his own relationship with Sophia. But unlike Marcus, Sterling had never had to choose between professional success and family devotion. His wealth and position allowed him to have both, to build an empire while grooming his daughter to inherit it. As Marcus watched the preparations, he noticed the subtle signs of stress that others missed. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed contracts. Sterling's jaw was clenched tighter than usual, and he kept checking his phone every few minutes. The legal team looked exhausted. Their expensive suits wrinkled from what had obviously been an all-night session of final document reviews. Something was making them nervous, though they were trying hard not to show it. Marcus retreated to the supply closet on the 38th floor and pulled out the crumpled Wilhelm Holdings document. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, the numbers seemed even more damning than they had in the darkened office. He had spent years learning to read between the lines of financial statements, to spot the carefully hidden weaknesses that companies tried to disguise. This document was a roadmap to disaster, and yet somehow Meridian's due diligence team had either missed these red flags or chosen to ignore them. The sound of approaching footsteps forced Marcus to quickly hide the document and resume his cleaning duties. Rebecca Sterling Morrison swept into the hallway, her heels clicking authoritatively against the marble floor. She was followed by 3 junior executives, all speaking rapidly into their phones, coordinating last-minute details for the ceremony. "The Wilhelm team landed an hour ago," one of them was saying. "Their limousines should arrive at 9:45. The media staging area is set up in the lobby, and security has cordoned off the executive floors." Rebecca nodded curtly, her mind clearly focused on the monumental task ahead. As she passed Marcus, she glanced in his direction with the same indifferent expression she reserved for furniture or office equipment. To her, he was simply part of the building's infrastructure, as unremarkable as the elevator or the air conditioning system. "Make sure those floors are spotless," she called over her shoulder without slowing her pace. "We have very important guests arriving today." Marcus continued mopping, his movements mechanical while his mind raced. He had perhaps 2 hours to find a way to communicate his concerns to someone who would listen and act on them. But who would believe a janitor's analysis of complex international finance? How could he explain his knowledge without revealing his identity? And even if he managed to get someone's attention, would they take him seriously enough to delay a $3 billion deal based on documents found in a trash can? The morning rush intensified as more executives arrived, their conversations growing louder and more animated. Marcus caught fragments of discussion about stock prices, market reactions, and the competitive advantages the merger would create. Everyone seemed intoxicated by the magnitude of the deal, the sheer audacity of combining 2 major financial institutions into a single global entity. The potential for profit was enormous, and the excitement was contagious. At 9 o'clock, the Wilhelm Holdings delegation arrived with great fanfare. Marcus watched from the service elevator as a convoy of black Mercedes sedans pulled up to the building's main entrance. The German executives emerged like conquering generals, their expensive overcoats and confident demeanor projecting an image of prosperity and success. Klaus Wilhelm himself was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that suggested he was accustomed to getting his way in any negotiation. The lobby transformed into a media circus as photographers and reporters jockeyed for position. Financial journalists from major publications had gathered to cover what they were calling the deal of the decade. Television crews set up cameras and lighting equipment, preparing for live broadcasts that would carry news of the merger to markets around the world. The excitement was palpable, the sense that everyone present was witnessing history in the making. Marcus used his janitorial access to move between floors, observing the proceedings from various vantage points. He watched as the Wilhelm executives were escorted to the 42nd floor boardroom, their laughter and animated conversations echoing through the hallways. They looked like men who had already won, who were simply going through the formalities of collecting their prize. But Marcus had seen enough failed companies and fraudulent schemes to recognize the signs. Klaus Wilhelm's smile was too broad, his handshake too firm, his eye contact too intense. These were the behaviors of a man trying to convince others of his sincerity, while hiding fundamental deceptions. The other Wilhelm executives displayed similar tells, their confidence masking what Marcus suspected was desperation. As 10:30 approached, Marcus made his decision. He could not stand by and watch thousands of innocent people lose their jobs because of a fraudulent merger. He could not let Sterling and his daughter walk blindly into a trap that would destroy everything they had built. But more importantly, He could not look Sophia in the eye that evening, knowing he had allowed a preventable disaster to occur when he possessed the knowledge to stop it. Marcus straightened his uniform and walked purposefully toward the executive elevator. His heart pounded as he pressed the button for the 42nd floor, the document from Wilhelm Holdings folded carefully in his pocket. He had no plan beyond getting into that boardroom and demanding that someone listen to him. He knew he would be dismissed, ridiculed, possibly arrested for disrupting such an important business meeting. But he also knew that his conscience would not allow him to remain silent. The elevator doors opened onto a scene of controlled chaos. Assistants rushed back and forth carrying documents and refreshments. Security guards stood at attention near the boardroom entrance. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, everyone aware that they were minutes away from witnessing the completion of a deal that would reshape the financial landscape. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped out of the elevator. Several people looked at him with confusion, wondering why a janitor was on the executive floor during such a critical time. But before anyone could question his presence, Marcus raised his voice above the conversations and made the announcement that would change everything. "Stop! Cancel the $3 billion deal immediately." The words echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, bringing all conversation to an abrupt halt. Every head turned toward Marcus, their expressions ranging from shock to outrage to complete bewilderment. Security guards immediately moved in his direction, their hands reaching for their radios to call for backup. But Marcus stood his ground, clutching the Wilhelm Holdings document like a lifeline. He had crossed the point of no return, abandoning 8 years of careful anonymity to prevent a catastrophe that only he could see coming. The next few minutes would determine whether he was remembered as a hero who saved Meridian Financial or as a delusional janitor who disrupted the most important business deal in the company's history. The silence that followed Marcus's outburst was deafening. For a moment, time seemed suspended in the pristine hallway of the 42nd floor. Then chaos erupted. Security guards rushed toward Marcus from multiple directions, their shoes thundering against the marble floor. Executives emerged from offices and conference rooms, drawn by the commotion. The Wilhelm Holdings delegation froze in the boardroom doorway, their faces displaying a mixture of confusion and alarm. CEO Jonathan Sterling pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The man who had built his reputation on maintaining absolute control of every situation now found himself dealing with a public disruption moments before the most important deal of his career. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, and his usually immaculate tie was askew from the rushed movement through the gathering crowd. "Who the hell are you?" Sterling demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Security, get this man out of here immediately." How did he even get up here? Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had once fueled his most important presentations to corporate boards and federal regulators. But this time the stakes were personal as well as professional. He thought of Sophia, probably just arriving at school, trusting that her father would pick her up that afternoon as he always did. He thought of the thousands of Meridian employees who had no idea their futures hung in the balance. "My name is Marcus Rodriguez," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "And this merger cannot proceed. Wilhelm Holdings is essentially bankrupt. They're using fraudulent accounting practices to hide massive debts that will destroy Meridian Financial within 6 months of completion." The crowd's reaction was immediate and hostile. Nervous laughter rippled through the assembled executives, the kind of uncomfortable sound people make when confronted with something so absurd it defies rational response. Rebecca Sterling Morrison stepped forward, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "You're a janitor. What could you possibly know about international finance?" "Security, arrest this man for trespassing and disrupting a business meeting." But Marcus pulled the crumpled Wilhelm Holdings document from his uniform pocket, holding it up like evidence in a criminal trial. The paper was wrinkled and stained from its time in the wastebasket, but the letterhead was clearly visible to everyone in the hallway. "This risk assessment was thrown away in Catherine Brooks's office," Marcus announced. "It details Wilhelm Holdings' actual financial position, including offshore shell companies used to hide debt, phantom assets that exist only on paper, and accounting irregularities that violate both German and American financial regulations." The mention of Catherine Brooks's name sent a visible shock through the crowd. Brooks was Meridian's senior vice president of risk assessment, one of the most respected analysts in the industry. If she had discarded this document, it meant she had either deemed it unimportant or irrelevant to the merger proceedings. Klaus Wilhelm himself emerged from the boardroom, his imposing figure cutting through the crowd with practiced authority. His face was calm, but Marcus noticed the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible tension in his jaw that suggested barely controlled panic. "This is absurd," Wilhelm declared in accented English. "Some maintenance worker finds papers in trash and thinks he understands complex international business. This is harassment designed to disrupt legitimate proceedings." But Marcus was no longer the invisible janitor who emptied trash cans and mopped floors. 8 years of suppressed expertise were awakening, and his analytical mind was operating at full capacity. He studied Wilhelm's body language, noted the way the German executive's hands trembled slightly, observed how his associates avoided direct eye contact with the Meridian team. The document references account 7749 Delta at Cayman International Bank. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. According to this analysis, that account contains negative $47 million, representing write-offs from failed real estate investments in Eastern Europe. But Wilhelm Holdings lists those same properties as current assets worth $200 million on their merger documentation. The specificity of Marcus's statement sent another ripple of unease through the crowd. These were not vague accusations or general suspicions. He was citing specific account numbers, exact figures, and verifiable details that could be independently confirmed. Sterling looked uncertainly between Marcus and the Wilhelm delegation. As CEO, he had not personally reviewed every detail of the due diligence process, trusting his team of experts to identify and address any potential risks. But something about the janitor's confidence and the precision of his claims was beginning to penetrate his initial skepticism. "Catherine," Sterling called out, "get up here immediately." Catherine Brooks emerged from the crowd, her face pale and drawn. As Senior Vice President of Risk Assessment, she had been working 18-hour days for months, reviewing every aspect of Wilhelm Holdings' financial structure. She looked exhausted and stressed, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from prolonged pressure and insufficient sleep. "Catherine, did you discard a Wilhelm Holdings risk assessment?" Sterling demanded. Brooks hesitated, her eyes darting between Sterling, Wilhelm, and Marcus. "There were preliminary reports from various sources," she said carefully. "Some contained unsubstantiated allegations and rumors. We focused on verified financial statements and official documentation." "Unsubstantiated?" Marcus challenged. "The document cites specific transactions that can be verified through international banking records. Account 7749 Delta, the Prague Commercial Center write-off, the Budapest Holdings liquidation that was never reported to German regulators. These aren't rumors, they're documented financial crimes." The crowd was growing larger as word of the disruptions spread throughout the building. Junior executives and administrative assistants gathered at the edges of the hallway, their phones out, recording what was rapidly becoming the most dramatic corporate confrontation in Meridian Financial's history. Rebecca Sterling Morrison stepped closer to Marcus, her expression a mixture of rage and growing concern. "Even if what you're saying is true, which I doubt, how could a janitor possibly understand complex international banking regulations? You're making claims that would require years of specialized training to comprehend." This was the moment Marcus had been dreading and anticipating simultaneously. For 8 years he had hidden his true identity, content to remain anonymous and forgotten, but the weight of moral responsibility was forcing him to reveal the truth about who he really was. "Because," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent hallway, "I'm not just a janitor. My name is Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. Until 8 years ago, I was the Senior Managing Director of International Risk Assessment at Goldman Sachs. I have a PhD in International Economics from Harvard and an MBA from Wharton. I have testified before Congress about financial fraud prevention and advised 3 presidents on fiscal policy." The revelation hit the crowd like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People who had been preparing to dismiss Marcus as a delusional maintenance worker now stared at him with expressions of shock and growing recognition. Sterling's face went completely white. He recognized the name now, remembered reading about Dr. Marcus Rodriguez in financial publications years ago. The man had been legendary on Wall Street, known for his uncanny ability to identify hidden risks in complex international deals. His sudden disappearance from the financial world had been the subject of speculation and rumors for years. "That's impossible," Rebecca whispered. "Marcus Rodriguez died in a car accident. It was in all the financial magazines." "My wife died in that accident," Marcus corrected, his voice thick with emotion. "I survived. And I walked away from everything because I had failed at being a husband and father while chasing professional success. I became a janitor because I wanted to be invisible, to focus on raising my daughter instead of building my career." The Wilhelm Holdings delegation was backing slowly toward the elevators, their confident demeanor evaporating as the implications of Marcus's identity became clear. If Dr. Marcus Rodriguez was questioning the legitimacy of their financial statements, it meant one of the world's foremost experts in financial fraud detection had identified serious problems with their deal. Klaus Wilhelm made one final attempt to salvage the situation. "Even if this man is who he claims to be, his information is outdated and incomplete. Our financial position has been thoroughly vetted by multiple international accounting firms." But Marcus was ready for this challenge. "Deloitte AG refused to sign off on your 2023 audit," he stated flatly. "Ernst & Young resigned from your account after discovering irregularities in your subsidiary reporting. KPMG is currently under investigation by German financial authorities for their role in certifying your fraudulent asset valuations." The hallway erupted in shocked murmurs. These were facts that only someone with access to the highest levels of international financial intelligence would know. Marcus was not making wild accusations. He was systematically dismantling Wilhelm Holdings' credibility with surgical precision. Sterling turned to his legal team, his face grave with understanding. "Is any of this true? Can we verify these claims?" The lead attorney, a nervous man named Patterson who looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor, nodded reluctantly. "We can make calls to our contacts in Germany and the Cayman Islands. But if Dr. Rodriguez is correct about these account numbers and regulatory issues, it would take weeks to fully investigate." "We don't have weeks," Rebecca said urgently. "The signing ceremony begins in 20 minutes. The media is already set up downstairs. The Wilhelm team has flown here specifically for this event." Marcus looked directly at Sterling, man to man, father to father. "Mr. Sterling, I've spent 8 years cleaning your building, watching your company grow and succeed. I've seen how hard your employees work, how much pride they take in what they've built here. This merger will destroy all of that. Wilhelm Holdings is a shell company propped up by fraud and desperation. If you proceed with this deal, Meridian Financial will be bankrupt within a year, and 30,000 people will lose their jobs." The weight of Marcus's words settled over the crowd like a heavy blanket. This was no longer about corporate politics or personal ambition. It was about the survival of everything Sterling had spent his career building, and the livelihoods of thousands of families who depended on Meridian Financial for their security and future. Sterling stood motionless in the marble hallway, his mind racing through the implications of Marcus's revelations. Around him, the Wilhelm Holdings delegation was growing increasingly agitated, their whispered conversations in German becoming more urgent and desperate. The media crews downstairs were expecting a triumphant announcement within minutes, while upstairs the deal of the century was crumbling under the weight of one man's conscience. "Patterson," Sterling commanded his lead attorney, "get Frankfurt on the line immediately. I want independent verification of every claim Dr. Rodriguez has made within the next 10 minutes." The lawyer scrambled for his phone, placing rapid calls to contacts in European financial regulatory agencies. His face grew progressively paler with each conversation, the responses clearly confirming Marcus's accusations. Klaus Wilhelm watched these developments with growing panic, realizing that his elaborate deception was unraveling in real time. Rebecca Sterling Morrison approached Marcus with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. "Dr. Rodriguez, if everything you're saying is accurate, then our entire due diligence team missed a massive fraud. How is that possible?" Marcus looked at the assembled crowd of executives, these powerful people who had built their careers on making high-stakes decisions with incomplete information. "Because you wanted to believe," he said simply. "Wilhelm Holdings told you exactly what you wanted to hear. The numbers were big enough to be exciting, but not so outrageous as to trigger suspicion. They exploited your ambition and used your own expertise against you." As Patterson continued his frantic phone calls, the truth became undeniable. German financial authorities confirmed that Wilhelm Holdings was under active investigation for fraud. Cayman banking officials verified the existence of the accounts Marcus had mentioned, along with their negative balances. International accounting firms acknowledged their refusal to certify Wilhelm's financial statements due to irregularities they could not reconcile. Klaus Wilhelm made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Even if there are minor accounting discrepancies, the fundamental value of this merger remains sound. We can address these issues after the completion of the deal. But Marcus shook his head firmly. There is no merger to complete. Wilhelm Holdings has no assets of value to transfer. You would be purchasing debt disguised as equity, bankruptcy masquerading as prosperity. The only sound business decision is to walk away immediately. Sterling looked at his daughter, seeing the devastation in her eyes as 18 months of work evaporated in a matter of minutes. Then he looked at Marcus, this unlikely savior who had risked everything to prevent a catastrophe. The irony was profound. A man who cleaned floors for $8 an hour had just saved a $3 billion company from destruction. "The merger is canceled," Sterling announced, his voice carrying absolute finality. "Security, please escort the Wilhelm delegation from the building. Legal, draft a statement for the media explaining that due diligence has revealed fundamental incompatibilities that make this transaction inadvisable." The Wilhelm team's facade of confidence finally cracked completely. Klaus Wilhelm's face flushed red with rage and humiliation as he realized his scheme had failed. "You will regret this decision," he snarled at Sterling. "We have contracts, legal obligations. We will sue for breach of agreement." "Feel free to try," Sterling replied coldly. "I suspect German prosecutors will be very interested in your accounting practices once this information becomes public." As security guards escorted the Wilhelm delegation toward the elevators, the crowd of Meridian employees slowly began to disperse. The crisis was over, the company saved, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. People whispered among themselves, trying to process what they had witnessed. The janitor they had ignored for 8 years had turned out to be one of the most respected financial minds of his generation. Marcus stood alone in the hallway as the executives returned to their offices, suddenly feeling the weight of his exposure. For 8 years he had been invisible, content in his anonymity. Now everyone knew who he really was, and that simple life he had built with Sophia was forever changed. Sterling approached him with genuine humility. "Dr. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology and a debt I can never repay. You've saved not just my company, but 30,000 jobs and countless family livelihoods. Name your price. Whatever you want, whatever position you desire, it's yours." The offer Marcus had once dreamed of hung in the air between them. Chief Financial Officer, Senior Vice President. Whatever title he wanted, along with a salary that would transform his and Sophia's lives overnight. He could have the corner office, the recognition, the respect he had earned through his expertise and sacrifice. But Marcus thought of Sophia, probably sitting in her 7th period science class, looking forward to their evening together when he would help her with homework and listen to her stories about her day. He thought of their small apartment in Pilsen, where they had built something more valuable than any corporate position could offer. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus said quietly, "I appreciate the offer more than you know. But I declined these opportunities 8 years ago for the same reason I'm declining now. I have the most important job in the world already. I'm Sophia's father." The simplicity of his response left Sterling speechless. Here was a man who could command millions in salary, who could reshape global financial markets with his expertise, choosing instead to remain a night janitor so he could be present for his daughter's childhood. Rebecca Sterling Morrison stepped forward, her earlier hostility replaced by genuine admiration. "Dr. Rodriguez, at least let us do something. Your daughter Sophia, if she ever wants to study business or finance, full scholarship to any university in the world. And please, take this." She handed him an envelope. "It's a small token of our gratitude, enough to secure Sophia's future education." Marcus accepted the envelope with grace, understanding that sometimes allowing others to express their gratitude was itself a gift. "Thank you. This will mean everything to Sophia's future." As the afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus made his way back to the service elevator. Tomorrow, he would return to his cleaning duties, emptying wastebaskets, and mopping floors. But tonight, he would pick up Sophia from school on time, as he always did, and listen to her dreams over dinner at their small kitchen table. The broken deal had been prevented. The company was saved. And Marcus Rodriguez, the legendary financial analyst who had chosen love over ambition, walked back into the shadows where he belonged, content in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that remain invisible to the world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.